For this episode, I'm going to talk about having wooden sword fights when I was a kid. But before we get started, go ahead and slam pin that like button like Lincoln Hawk did and over the top. When I was young, say about 5 years old, it would be around, 1978. My brother and friends around the block, we used to have wooden sword fights. And what we used to do is we would find slats from fencing that our parents or the neighbors would actually replace a fence, pull it down, break up all the wood, and they'd put it in the pile on the side of the yard. Of course, we would dive on that because we can make swords out of that. And the perfect swords were the thin slats, and at the top of the fence slats there, they had like a little point, right? Almost like a steeple. There's your sword tip. And we would grab those and we would want to make swords out of them. And we would raid our dad's workbench, grab hammers. Again, we're 5 years old doing this. Well, some of the kids were maybe 6, 7 years old. My brother was 17 months older than me, so a little bit older. But we'd grab the hammers and we'd find nails, just small nails, and break off another little portion of the fence, because this way we can do like a cross guard on the sword there to prevent the blades coming down, and hitting your hands. So we would nail a couple nails in there and just have fun making swords. And back then, we weren't concerned with slivers or the sword pieces of wood, breaking off in our hands. Of course, we would get slivers and we would have to, pull those out. But mostly what we do is we get masking tape or electrical tape and we'd wrap up the handles and that would protect us. But again, this was the late 70s, so we weren't big on safety. We just wanted to have fun. So we would build out our swords, and it just never failed. You'd run out of nails, and you want to put at least 2 nails on that cross hand guard, right? So it prevents this, rocking back and forth. And we would just say, hey, you know what? We ran out of nails, but one will do. Put one in there, and then as you're, doing sword fights with your buddies, his sword blade would come down, hit that, and it would just bend it, and it would cinch your hand, right, in your finger. Of course, you start crying, and all your friends rush over because, as I always say in my other videos, whenever your parents start hearing crying, right, fun's over with. They're like, all right, fun's over, you kids go home. And my parents would say to us, especially my mom, go inside. That's it. Stay inside. They just don't want to deal with it. They want to put up with it. Your friends are always trying to, hey, be quiet, and if you broke your sword or whatever, they would give you their sword. It's as long as we kept playing and having fun. And of course, what I mentioned on one of my previous videos, we would have shields, and the shields were the lids, had a little handle on it, to our tin trash cans. And you would grab those and you'd use that as your shield. Of course, your parents and even the neighbors or the parents of my friends, they'd get all mad because we would never put those back on the trash can. We would just take them and throw them away. Cats are getting into the trash cans, coyotes, rats, the trash cans would fall over. It was just a mess. But you know what? As long as we had our shields, that's all that mattered. And once we had all of our swords made, we had, Rumble Royale. We would have a huge swashbuckling fight, and everyone's out there with their swords and hitting it on the shields and just having a blast. And of course, it never fails. One of our friends or the kids, or even my brother, would do this quite often. They would take 2 slats, nail them together, so now it's extra robust and heavy, right? And they would swing that, and you try to block it with your flimsy little 1-slat sword, and it would break off, right? Just sever it right in half. And of course, everybody, is laughing. If it was my sword, I'd just start crying. And then my brother was like, well, here, you can have my sword, but don't cry so we can continue to play. And it was always funny to watch the neighbors, the parents or even adults or anybody just driving down our street, turn the corner and you'd see just a group of kids in a bunch having this huge sword fight. And crack, 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 shield, crack, crack, shield. Just having a blast, all kinds of racket. Can you imagine if you saw that today? In my neighborhood, I see some kids around having fun, but definitely I don't see them doing anything like that. Now, I remember this one time it added a little bit more chaos to our sword fight. The house that I grew up in it butted up against a large field that had radio towers in the back. So, a lot of rats and so forth, and different animals, even some snakes here and there would actually come into our yard, but not too much. But this one time, I remember we're out doing our sword fights, and again, my cross guard, the handle guard on the sword, was just getting flimsy and rickety, so I wanted to add a couple more nails in there. So I left the battle, I come into the back, and we had a shed in the backyard that actually had the small nails that I needed, outside of the large nails that were in my dad's workbench in the garage. So I went out to the back in this shed and climbed up on a little workbench. As you walked into the shed, you had benches on each side. Okay, and I go in, look to the left. I remember getting up on the table, and it's funny what you can remember. I can remember back to age 4. Again, I was about 5 years old here. And getting up, I found the nails, go ahead and grab them, and I started pulling a couple out. And behind me, like I'm facing this way, behind me, I hear a hiss. And it wasn't a hiss of a snake, right? It was just this, and I was thinking, kind of like a cat, as I just, looked at, what's that? There was this huge possum sitting inside of a box at my face level, head level, with its mouth open. And if you've ever been close up to a possum, it looks like a large rat, right, on steroids, big rat tail with huge teeth, right? When they open their mouth, they got super sharp teeth. They got these just weird little hand-like claws. And it was looking right at me and just hissing at me. And of course, I just bolt out of there, kind of like freaked out. But then I'm like, oh, let me go tell all of my friends and my brother. So I started running through the garage. Hey, I found a possum. Come check it out. All my friends stopped what they're doing, put down their swords, and they were just running in to check out this possum. And yeah, as we get close, they would check out the possum. And, we would just close the door, and we wanted to make sure we weren't going to bother the possum. Of course we didn't do that. This was the late 70s. We had to f*** with it. So I had my wooden sword, and my friends and my brother, they went right back out into the front yard where they were having their battle, grabbed their swords, and then they came back. And it was pretty cramped inside the shed. So you couldn't just get any whacks at this. And of course, back in the 70s, we didn't want to hurt anything. But again, we were young kids. We just kind of wanted to really mess with it, So what we end up doing is just kind of getting some jabs at it and poking at it. And it's hissing at us. And it's biting the tips of our swords and marking it up and kind of just fraying it. It's just crazy how sharp their teeth are. And then all of a sudden, as we were getting close in there and laughing, it jumps out of the box onto the table towards us. We just dropped everything, freaked out, and everybody just scattered, just fanned out, thinking that this thing was on their heels, and everyone just started screaming for their lives. And of course, when we did that, my mom comes running out to see what's going on, saw that we were messing with this possum, and she's like, fun's over with. Me and my brother had to go inside. She sent all of the our neighborhood kids, our friends, home. That was it. And then she got my dad to come out, and he was just calm and collective. Got a larger box, kind of corralled that possum up in it, put the flaps down so it couldn't jump out, walked over to the fence in the back, and it had some gaps in the fence that we can put it out into the field, and he let it go. So it's funny, you can have fun with sword fights and just how everything, could change in an instance to battling each other to now, you're dealing with a wild animal. That's the stuff we did back then. Super fun. Probably not the smartest things to be doing, especially, hitting each other. Yeah, we got splinters, and once in a while we would get hit. But, we had great imaginations, us Gen Xers, and we just had a blast making up stuff, and wooden sword fights were part of that imagination.